You walked into that room last week and you felt it. That moment when you extended your hand to someone 3 levels above you and watched their eyes glaze over. They shook your hand, sure, but they were already scanning past your shoulder for someone more relevant. You told yourself it was them, that they were rude, that they didn't see your value. But here's what actually happened. Within 3 seconds of opening your mouth, you broadcast your exact position in the hierarchy, and they dismissed you with the efficiency of a predator recognizing prey. This is the reality you've been avoiding. Your networking isn't failing because you lack skills. It's failing because powerful people have spent decades developing sophisticated filters, and you're triggering every single alarm that screams, waste of time. The fatal mistake happens in those first 30 seconds. And 97% of you make it without even realizing. You lead with what you need. You explain who you are with an undertone of justification. You compliment them in a way that positions you below them. I've been following your work translates to, I'm in the audience, you're on the stage. I'd love to pick your brain means, my time is worthless, yours is valuable, please give me charity. I really admire what you've built. Is heard as I haven't built anything myself. Every word is a confession of lower status, and powerful people process this information faster than you can finish your sentence. They've heard your pitch 10,000 times from 10,000 forgettable faces, and their brain has learned to shut down the moment the pattern emerges. You think you're networking. They think you're begging. Here's the part that's going to sting. Powerful people can smell desperation through screens now. That carefully crafted LinkedIn message you spent 40 minutes writing? They knew what it was in the subject line. The email where you tried to offer value first? They saw the hook 3 paragraphs before you said it. You're not clever. You're not subtle. You're employing tactics that were transparent 20 years ago, and you're confused why they don't respond. The reason is simple. Desperation has a frequency, and their entire life is built around avoiding that frequency. They've constructed walls, hired gatekeepers, developed intuitions, all designed to filter out the noise of people who need them. And you are the noise. Every room you enter has an invisible caste system, and everyone in that room knows exactly where they stand except you. You're operating on hope and delusion, while everyone else is operating on cold calculation. There are people in that room who matter, people who might matter, and people who will never matter. The powerful have already categorized every person before the event even started. They know who they need to speak with, who they should speak with, and who they can safely ignore. You think you're mingling. They're executing a predetermined strategy with military precision. And when you approach them with your authentic self, your genuine interest, your honest intention to connect, you're bringing a knife to a gunfight. Being yourself is the advice given to you by people who want you to stay where you are. It's comfortable advice. It's morally comfortable advice. It lets you fail while maintaining your identity as a good person. But here's what they don't tell you. Being yourself only works if yourself is already valuable. Authenticity is a luxury afforded to those who have already accumulated power. When you're powerful, your quirks become charming. Your rough edges become authentic. Your controversial opinions become thought leadership. But when you're nobody, those same traits make you forgettable at best, repellent at worst. The powerful can afford to be themselves because themselves is already a refined product of decades of strategic self-construction. What you call authentic, they call unfinished. There are 3 types of people in the ecosystem of power, and you need to understand which one you are right now, not which one you aspire to be. There's prey. People who give energy, time, attention, and resources without strategic return. They operate on hope. They believe in karma. They think good things come to good people. They are the energy source that feeds the system. Then there are predators, people who extract value efficiently. They're not evil, they're just clear about the transaction. They know what they want, and they take it within socially acceptable parameters. They're focused, ruthless in their prioritization, and completely comfortable with the transactional nature of relationships. And finally, there are architects, people who design systems where value flows toward them automatically. They're not hunting. They've built infrastructure. They've created situations where people need them, seek them, offer them value without being asked. You're prey right now, and you're lying to yourself about it. You're telling yourself you're building relationships when you're actually giving away your time to people who will never think about you again. You're telling yourself you're being generous when you're actually being taken advantage of. You're telling yourself you're playing the long game when you're actually just being patient about losing. The hard truth is that prey sometimes becomes predator, but it requires a fundamental shift in how you view every human interaction. It requires you to stop seeking and start evaluating. Stop offering and start withholding. Stop hoping and start calculating. Power recognizes power through a principle most people never consciously understand: mirroring. When two powerful people meet, there's an immediate recognition. They speak the same language. They understand the same constraints. They respect the same boundaries. They're not trying to extract from each other in the first conversation because they both know that's amateur hour. They're assessing long-term strategic value. They're thinking 3 moves ahead. They're wondering what happens if they're in the same room 5 years from now. This is why you can't fake your way into their circle with tactics alone. You're not mirroring power. You're mirroring hunger, and hunger is the opposite of power. Authenticity is marketed to you as a virtue because it keeps you predictable. It keeps you controllable. It keeps you exactly where you are. The uncomfortable reality that nobody wants to say out loud is that elite relationships are fundamentally transactional, not in a crude, immediate sense, not in a what can you do for me right now sense, but in a sophisticated, long-term, strategic sense. Powerful people maintain relationships because those relationships serve their interests. They're not collecting friends, they're building a portfolio of human capital, and they're absolutely ruthless about pruning that portfolio when someone stops providing value. This doesn't make them bad people, it makes them effective people. They've simply accepted a truth that you're still resisting. Time is the only truly scarce resource, and every relationship is an investment of that resource. They've done the math. They know that maintaining a relationship with someone who cannot or will not provide value is a net loss. They know that the guilt you might feel about cutting someone off is a tax on your effectiveness. They've eliminated that guilt. They've replaced it with clarity. And that clarity is what separates them from you. You think you're networking, but what you're actually doing is begging. Every time you approach someone more powerful than you, with that eager energy, that helpful demeanor, that willingness to please, you're not building a connection. You're broadcasting your position at the bottom of the hierarchy. And here's what nobody tells you: that position becomes permanent the moment they categorize you. The human brain makes snap judgments about status in milliseconds. And once that judgment is made, reversing it requires such an expenditure of energy that most people simply won't bother. You've been filed. You're in the drawer labeled supplicant. And that drawer rarely gets opened for opportunity. It gets opened when someone needs something done that they don't want to do themselves. The affirmation trap is the most insidious mechanism keeping you powerless, and you're caught in it right now. Every time you refresh your inbox hoping for a response from that person you met at the conference, you're feeding it. Every time you craft a follow-up message, carefully designed to seem casual, but actually reeks of desperation, you're strengthening its hold. Every time you tell yourself that you just need to provide more value, be more helpful, be more available, you're digging the hole deeper. The trap operates on a simple principle. It convinces you that approval from powerful people is the currency of assent, when in reality, approval is what they give to people they've already decided aren't threats. Respect, on the other hand, is reserved for equals or those they perceive as potentially superior. And respect is never given to someone who needs it. Let me show you the neurochemistry of your own submission. When you send that eager message, when you offer help unprompted, when you compliment their work hoping they'll notice you, your brain releases a small hit of dopamine in anticipation of their response. You're literally getting high on the possibility of their validation. And like any addiction, the hits become less satisfying over time, requiring more desperate attempts to achieve the same feeling. Meanwhile, the powerful person on the receiving end experiences something entirely different. Their brain registers your behavior as confirmation of their status. They get a dopamine hit too, but theirs comes from dominance confirmation, not from hope. They feel good because you've reminded them they're above you. And the more you do this, the more entrenched that dynamic becomes. You're training them to see you as beneath them. You're reinforcing your own subordination with every interaction. Stop watching. Go to the comments and write, "I just need to master the system to win." These are psychological mechanisms. Use them at your advantage. The difference between respect and approval is the difference between power and servitude. Yet most of you have spent your entire lives conflating the two. Approval is what children seek from parents, what employees seek from bosses, what the powerless seek from the powerful. It's a one-directional flow of validation that confirms hierarchy. Respect is mutual acknowledgement of capability, threat potential, or value. Powerful people don't need your approval, so they never seek it. They do, however, need your respect, or more accurately, they need you to demonstrate that you respect yourself enough, that your respect for them means something. When you approach someone powerful with the energy of seeking approval, you're handing them a gift they don't value. When you approach them with the energy of offering respect between equals, you're presenting them with something rare. A relationship that doesn't diminish them, but also doesn't elevate them. You're presenting neutrality, which in the status game is the first step toward perceived equality. But here's where it gets truly dark. The powerful have learned to weaponize your need for affirmation. They've discovered that the easiest way to control someone is to give them intermittent validation. Not constant approval, which would raise your status, but sporadic acknowledgement that keeps you hoping, striving, performing. It's the same mechanism casinos use with slot machines. Variable ratio reinforcement is the most powerful behavioral conditioning tool in existence. And you're being conditioned every time someone powerful responds to one message but ignores 3 others. Every time they like one of your posts but scroll past 10 others. Every time they remember your name at one event but forget it at the next. You think you're building a relationship. They know they're training a resource. The scarcity principle is the first law of manufactured status, and it's the reason why your availability is destroying your value. When you respond immediately to every message, when you rearrange your schedule to accommodate their calendar, when you make it clear that access to you is unlimited, you're communicating something very specific. Your time has no competing demands, which means your time has no value, which means you have no value. Powerful people operate on the assumption that valuable people are scarce. Their time is fragmented among competing high-value opportunities. When you demonstrate that you have no such competition for your time, you're revealing that you're not receiving other high-value opportunities, which means you're not high value. It's circular logic, but it's the logic that governs elite networks. The solution is strategic scarcity. Not playing games for the sake of games, but genuinely building a life so full of valuable activities that your availability becomes naturally limited. And when it's not naturally limited, manufacturing that limitation until it becomes real. Strategic withdrawal is the most counterintuitive power move in the networking arsenal, and it's the one most of you will never execute because it requires killing your ego. When a relationship with a powerful person isn't yielding returns, your instinct is to increase effort, send more messages, provide more value, be more present. This is exactly backward. The power move is to disappear, not with announcement, not with drama, but with quiet, complete absence. Stop initiating, stop responding quickly, stop being available. What this does is trigger a status anxiety in the other person that they didn't know they had. Humans are loss-averse creatures. We don't value what we have until it's gone. When you withdraw strategically, you transform from a constant presence they've taken for granted into an absence they notice. And that noticing is the first crack in the status hierarchy. Suddenly they're wondering why you've pulled back. Suddenly they're questioning whether they misjudged your value. Suddenly they're the ones reaching out. You've inverted the dynamic without saying a word. The equal plane illusion is about manufacturing perceived status before you've earned actual status. and it's the most delicate operation in the social climbing playbook. You cannot claim equality directly. The moment you say "I'm just like you" to someone powerful, you've confirmed that you're not. Equality must be implied through behavior, through context, through association. It's demonstrated by how you carry yourself in their presence. Not deferential, but not presumptuous. Not seeking approval, but not challenging unnecessarily. The goal is to create cognitive dissonance in their mind. Their instinct tells them you should be subordinate based on your actual status, but your behavior suggests equality. That dissonance is uncomfortable, and the human brain resolves discomfort through rationalization. If you're behaving like an equal, maybe you are an equal. Maybe they miss something about your status. Maybe you have power or connections they're not aware of. You're not lying. You're simply allowing their brain to fill in gaps with assumptions that favor you. And once those assumptions are made, they become difficult to dislodge. Dark reciprocity is the shadow version of the relationship advice you've been fed your entire life. You've been told that giving creates obligation, that helping people makes them want to help you back. This is true for peer relationships. It's dangerously false for hierarchical ones. When you give to someone more powerful than you without them asking, you're not creating obligation. You're confirming your role as a provider of unrequested services, which is another way of saying servant. Obligation only exists between equals or flows downward in hierarchies. The powerful feel no obligation to those beneath them who give freely. They feel entitled to it. The dark reciprocity law states that you must make powerful people give to you first, even in small ways, before you give to them. This inverts the obligation flow. When they've invested in you first, even minimally, they have a psychological need to justify that investment. They need to believe you were worth it, and the way they justify it is by investing more. You've created a sunk cost fallacy in your favor. They've put chips on the table betting on you, and now they need you to win so their bet looks smart. The spreadsheet exists, maybe not literally, though for some it does, but it exists in the mind of every powerful person you'll ever meet. It's a mental ledger of social capital. Who owes whom? Who provides value? Who extracts it? Who's worth maintaining? Who's dead weight? Every interaction is an entry. Every favor is recorded. Every failure to reciprocate is noted. You think relationships are about feelings, about connection, about human warmth. At the top, relationships are about mathematics, the return on invested time and resources, the strategic value of maintained connections, the opportunity cost of every hour spent with one person instead of another. This isn't cynicism. This is efficiency. And if you want to operate at that level, you need to start keeping your own spreadsheet. Not to become cold, but to become clear, to stop wasting your finite time on relationships that will never yield returns. To start investing in connections that compound. To begin thinking like the people you want to become. But here's what the spreadsheet reveals that most people never want to face. Most of your current relationships have negative ROI. That college friend you keep meeting for drinks who only talks about his problems. That former colleague who only reaches out when she needs something. That family member who drains your energy every time you interact. These aren't relationships. They're liabilities. And the powerful people you're trying to connect with can sense these liabilities on you like a scent. They see you managing down, spending time with people below your target status, and they categorize you accordingly. You cannot ascend while dragging weight. You cannot climb while carrying people who won't climb themselves. This is the truth that destroys friendships. This is the reality that ends marriages. This is the calculation that creates the loneliness at the top that everyone warns about, but nobody explains. The loneliness isn't a side effect, it's a requirement. You cannot maintain relationships with people operating at fundamentally different levels of ambition, capability, or power. The gap becomes too wide. The conversations become too strained. The resentment becomes too heavy. And so you cut, not with cruelty but with clarity, not with drama but with distance. You simply stop investing time in relationships that don't serve your ascent. And yes, this makes you a different kind of person. Yes, this changes something fundamental about your humanity. That's the price. The only question is whether you're willing to pay it. Now we move into the architecture of elite connection, the systematic approach that separates those who stumble into occasional opportunities from those who engineer entire networks of power around themselves. This is where theory becomes methodology, where understanding becomes execution. You've diagnosed the problem. You've learned to stop bleeding status through desperate validation seeking. Now you build the machine that pulls powerful people into your orbit. And understand this clearly. What I'm about to give you is not feel-good networking advice. This is the operational manual that powerful people use but never discuss publicly. The strategies they deploy while smiling and pretending relationships just happen organically. Let's begin with what I call the patron paradox. You don't have power yet. That's the reality. You're not the most successful person in the room. You're not the most connected. You're not the one everyone wants access to. So how do you make powerful people need you when you have nothing they want? The answer lies in understanding that power isn't monolithic. It's fragmented. Every powerful person has gaps, blind spots, needs they can't fulfill themselves. Your job is to become the bridge, not by offering your labor, that's servant positioning, but by controlling access to something they actually value. Information is the most accessible form of this currency. You don't need to be an expert. You need to be a curator, a filter, someone who saves them time by synthesizing what matters. Find 3 industries or domains that intersect with their interests. Become genuinely knowledgeable, not expert level, just competent enough to separate signal from noise. Then provide insights they can't easily get elsewhere. Not constantly, not desperately, but precisely when it actually matters. This is information arbitrage. You're trading in a currency that costs you time, but saves them something more valuable, their attention and cognitive load. But there's a more powerful version of this. Becoming the connector, the person who controls access to other valuable people. This seems impossible when you're starting from nothing, but it's not. You don't need to know the most powerful people to be valuable. You need to know the people that powerful people want to meet, but haven't accessed yet. The emerging entrepreneur in a space they're curious about. The researcher working on something relevant to their next move. The younger demographic they're trying to understand. You position yourself at the intersection. You make introductions that create value for both parties. And critically, you never ask for anything in return immediately. You're building a ledger. A mental accounting system where powerful people owe you, even if they don't consciously recognize it yet. Over time, you become infrastructure, someone they can't easily replace because you've made yourself useful in ways that aren't transactional enough to feel like employment, but valuable enough that your absence would be noticed. Then we have what I call calculated vulnerability. This confuses most people because they think power requires invincibility. Wrong. Strategic weakness is one of the most sophisticated tools in elite relationship building. But understand the mechanism here. You're not actually being vulnerable. You're performing vulnerability in a way that communicates strength. The confession technique works like this. You reveal a flaw or failure, but one that occurred in the past and that you've clearly overcome. Or one that implies capabilities most people don't have. A powerful investor doesn't care that you failed at your first startup. That's not vulnerability. That's credentials. It shows you've been in the arena. But you frame it as a confession, as something difficult to admit, and this creates false intimacy. The other person feels you've trusted them with something personal. The relationship deepens. But you've actually revealed nothing that damages your position. In fact, you've elevated it by showing battle scars that prove you fight battles worth having scars from. The key is calibration. What you reveal must make you more interesting, not more pathetic. More complex, not more weak. You're not trauma dumping. You're not seeking therapy. You're strategically showing dimension in a way that makes powerful people feel they're seeing the real you, when in fact they're seeing a carefully curated version designed to build connection. And here's the darker layer. When someone shares something with you in return, which they often will, because vulnerability tends to be reciprocal, you now have information, leverage. Not to use maliciously, but to understand their psychology, their fears, their drivers. You're building a psychological profile while they think you're building a friendship. The friendship might be real, The profiling is definitely real. Both can coexist. Association alchemy is perhaps the most visibly Machiavellian of these laws because it's about manufacturing credibility through proximity. You are judged by who you're seen with. This is shallow, this is unfair, this is absolutely how human psychology works. So you engineer it. Getting into rooms you don't belong in requires understanding that most exclusive spaces have cracks. Conferences have volunteer positions. Industry events have early bird pricing before they're sold out. Private gatherings have +1s. You find the crack and you slip through. But here's what separates the amateur from the architect. Once you're in the room, you don't act like you snuck in. You act like you belong. Not arrogantly, not fakely, but with the quiet assumption that your presence is justified. Because the moment you signal that you don't belong, everyone's instinct will be to confirm that assessment and exclude you. Third-party validation is your accelerant here. One credible person vouching for you is worth more than 100 self-promotions. So you engineer those vouchers. You do exceptional work for someone who has credibility in the space you're trying to enter. Not for free. That's servant positioning, but for reasonable compensation, with the explicit understanding that a testimonial or introduction is part of the value exchange. Then you leverage that introduction to the next level, and the next. Each connection becoming a stepping stone. Each relationship providing access to the next tier. This is ladder climbing made systematic. Name dropping is the crude version of this, and most people do it wrong. They spray names desperately, trying to impress everyone. This screams insecurity. Precision weapon means you mention a connection only when it's directly relevant, when it adds specific value to the conversation, and when it's verifiable. The power move is actually the opposite of name dropping. It's when you obviously know someone impressive, but don't mention it until someone else brings them up. Then you casually reveal the connection. This signals that you have so much social capital you don't need to advertise it. That's high-status behavior. That's what powerful people notice. Now, the long-game manipulation. This is where most people fail because they're optimizing for immediate returns. They meet someone powerful and they want results now. Introduction now. Investment now. Opportunity now. This is amateur hour. The powerful person can smell the extraction attempt and they withdraw. You're playing a different game. You're planting seeds that might not harvest for years. You meet someone who's mid-level now, but clearly ascending. You provide value without asking for anything. You stay in touch without being needy. You remember details about their life that others forget. You send relevant articles. You make introductions that help them. You're building a relationship foundation that will pay dividends when they reach the next level of power. And they will remember who was there before they made it, who helped without asking, who believed in them before everyone else did. The follow-up formula is critical here. Most people either never follow up, or they follow up once and give up. The systematic approach is different. After meeting someone valuable, you follow up within 48 hours with something specific from your conversation. Not generic, not nice to meet you, but a reference to something they mentioned, an article related to their interest, an introduction to someone they said they wanted to meet. This first follow-up is your deposit. Then you wait. 30 days later, you touch base again. Different value, different context. You're establishing a pattern of providing worth without extracting. 3 months later, another touch. 6 months later, another. You're building what I call dependency loops. Over time, you become a consistent source of value in their life. They start to expect your insights. They start to think of you when opportunities arise. They start to feel like they owe you, even though you've never explicitly asked for anything. And when you finally do make an ask, which you will, it feels natural. It feels like the relationship has evolved to that point. Not because you forced it, but because you architected it. Creating these dependency loops requires understanding the psychology of obligation. Humans have a deep need to reciprocate. When someone provides value consistently, the psychological debt accumulates. But here's the sophisticated part. You never make them feel indebted. You never keep score visibly. You act like you're just being helpful, like you're just a generous person. But you are keeping score. Mentally, strategically. And you will collect. Just not in ways that feel like collection. You'll collect in introductions, in opportunities, in moments when they choose you over someone else because they feel connected to you, because they feel like they know you, because they feel like they owe you. Even if they can't quite articulate why, the exit strategy is perhaps the most brutal law because it requires you to make calculations about human relationships that feel fundamentally cold. But power requires pruning. Not everyone who was useful at one stage remains useful at the next. Not every relationship serves your continued ascent. Some connections become dead weight. They take energy but provide no return. They represent a version of yourself you're moving beyond. And you have to cut them, not with cruelty but with strategic distance. The Ghost Protocol is for toxic but powerful contacts. People who have influence but whose association damages you. You can't burn the bridge because they might be useful later or might retaliate if rejected overtly. So you fade, you become progressively less available. You respond slower, you provide less value, you create natural distance without creating an incident. Eventually, the relationship atrophies on its own. No drama. No burned bridge, just strategic withdrawal. For relationships that are simply no longer serving you but aren't toxic, the approach is different. You maintain minimal contact. You're pleasant but busy. You're friendly but unavailable. You keep the door open but you stop walking through it. This allows you to reactivate the connection if circumstances change, if they become useful again, if the power dynamic shifts. You're not closing options. You're reallocating attention to higher value relationships. This is portfolio management applied to human connection. And yes, this makes you calculating. Yes, this makes you someone who evaluates relationships based on utility. That's exactly what powerful people do. They just don't admit it. The elite integration system is about combining all of these laws into a systematic approach. You're not deploying one tactic randomly, you're running a coordinated strategy. You identify the 5 most powerful people you want in your network within the next 90 days. You research their interests, their needs, their gaps. You engineer opportunities to provide value. You use the connector strategy to make yourself useful. You deploy calculated vulnerability to build intimacy. You leverage association alchemy to position yourself in their proximity. You play the long game, knowing that not all of these will convert immediately. You maintain the relationships systematically through the follow-up formula, and you ruthlessly cut relationships that no longer serve this ascent. This is the 90-day power network blueprint. Executed properly, you will have fundamentally transformed your social capital. You will have access you didn't have. You will have relationships with people who were previously unreachable. You will have positioned yourself as someone valuable rather than someone seeking value. And the maintenance protocol is simple. Continue providing worth, continue being strategic about who gets your time, continue evaluating relationships based on mutual value creation, continue ascending. But here's the final warning. The ethical abyss is real. At some point in this process, you will realize you've become someone who calculates human connection, who evaluates people based on utility, who maintains relationships strategically rather than organically. You will have crossed a line that most people never even see, and you cannot uncross it. You cannot unsee what you now see. You cannot return to naive authenticity once you've mastered strategic performance. The question you must answer is whether the power is worth the price. Whether the connections are worth what you're becoming. Whether ascending the hierarchy is worth losing something fundamental about your humanity. I cannot answer that for you. I can only tell you that every powerful person has answered it. And they chose the climb. Now the choice is yours. Subscribe to join the 1%.